Welcome to the Kings Beat podcast. I am James Ham, your Kings insider for ESPN 1320 and the founder of the Kings Beat. Joining me, Mr. Brenden Nunes from the Kings Pulse podcast and the Kings Herald. What's up, Brenden?
Not too much, James. Another day in the life, I guess.
Another day in the life. And, of course, Fox 40s, Sean Cunningham. Like, we can have some fun with that, Sean. I like it. I
feel like if there's a Fox 40, there needs to be like some kind of sounder, you know, or like a big, like a what kind of noise does a fox make? I don't. I remember that song. What does the fox say? That was awful, by the way.
Yeah. I think that was awful.
I think now we need to tie it into the song.
Yeah, we're gonna have to have an intro noise for you. That makes sense.
Production value. We're not live this time. This is I got so spoiled from that live podcast we did the other night that I was like already searching for the comments, and I'm like, no, idiot, we're not live. So now I can't find these comments that amuse the hell out of me.
That's funny. We could go live. We could do more live shows, and we might start doing that. It's just about like production value and all that stuff. And sometimes there are moments where we have internet failures and we've got to go back in editing and chop them up, and you would just be sitting there watching a live stream that goes blank for like 3 minutes while James's internet reboots. Okay, so we've got tons to discuss today, but we're going to start with the topic of the day, which is Brenden has started watching There's Something About Mary.
Homework assignments were due, and Brenden came and delivered. Brenden, your thoughts on the Farrelly Brothers classic, There's Something About Mary?
Yeah, I'm about halfway through, pretty close to exactly halfway.
What do you mean halfway?
Blasphemy.
This is not a freaking Netflix series, Brenden. This is an hour and a half movie.
I was told it's a 2-hour movie. I was told I wouldn't fall asleep. I did fall asleep. I'm not going to lie. And then started watching it again today, trying to get caught up before this recording, but my dog needs to be walked.
Okay. When's the last time you sat through a full movie? Maybe we need to explore that.
I watched The Town the other day and watched the whole thing.
Oh, the whole thing?
The whole thing.
That's longer than Something About Mary.
No, I might have watched 2 different parts, actually.
Oh my!
Typically, I throw something on, and I'm like notorious for falling asleep.
When you go to a movie, do you just like walk out randomly and go, you know what? I'll catch the other half for another $12 at another time.
Yeah, I have not gone to a movie in a long time. Jesus. I went to Spider-Man when it came out, and instantly realized that I was not caught up enough to be watching that one. But
that one's difficult because if you don't know all of the things that have happened beforehand, you're in some trouble.
Yeah, you have to know everybody's cousins and family trees. It's way too complicated for me.
Okay,
Something About Mary was pretty funny though.
But you put it down like a book.
No, I literally was watching it right before we hit this recording too. I just have other things going on. It's all like I am watching it.
But this is normal behavior. This is normal behavior where you will stop watching it and watch it in segments.
Yes.
Why?
Like I'm obsessed with Ozark right now, and I don't know how often. I know it's different types of watching, but I fall asleep mid-episode all the time. I'm always, because I watch things at night, and I'm always just falling asleep in the middle of it.
I blew through the first half of Ozark in one day, and the second half of Ozark the day it came out, like instantly. That's how I roll.
I now question how it is you can stay awake while watching an NBA basketball, like watching NBA basketball.
Sacramento Kings.
Different.
Yeah, especially the Kings.
Fair enough.
We look over and he's sleeping. We're like, what is happening?
Yeah.
He's just got narcolepsy and he's just out.
Watch the second half tomorrow.
Yeah, this could have something to do with the fact that, of course, Brenden is of an age where his attention span is like a gnat. You're raised in the Twitter universe.
I hear that argument, James, but honestly, we're talking about a freaking movie, my guy. Like, you can.
This podcast is about to be as long as the movie.
That's right.
How do you make it through these podcasts? We're gonna be like, it's because the dog plays with a toy and it instantly wakes up Brenden.
Okay, so I just to be honest with you, I watched the first half of the movie as well in the last 48 hours. Like, what was the funniest part so far?
Probably when he pretends, the PI pretends that Mary is a mail order bride, going over to Japan, I believe it is.
And
he talks her up as if she's pretty big, and
they pay by the pound over there.
They pay by the pound, like tuna, like tuna.
That's the best part. Like the zipper scene didn't get you.
The zipper scene was funny, especially when just more and more people start coming in the room. That's what really got me. The guy crawls through the window.
The beans.
Yeah. No, it was a pretty good one. It was a pretty good one.
Okay.
I also did get to the 8-second abs, or 8-minute abs, 7-minute abs, 6-minute abs. That was a pretty good scene. That was the last thing I saw right before I finished. Pretty much.
Shout out Harlan Williams. But can I just point out too, if anybody's, this is a very funny movie, and if no one's seen it, please see it. But there are
watch it in 2 halves, though.
No, don't do that garbage. That's absolute nonsense. But I will say there are a lot of things that don't age well, as there are in a lot of movies. So just putting that little blanket out there, just because there are moments in that movie that you just kind of cringe at today. Yeah. But nevertheless, it is a funny movie.
Yeah. All right, let's get on to actual basketball, or we'll start with the business side. If you're watching on YouTube, we picked up a ton of subscribers doing the live show, so that was spectacular. So if you are watching right now on YouTube, go down below, subscribe, and give us a thumbs up. The last pod, we had over 300 likes, 300 thumbs ups.
Wow.
So yeah, that's pretty stunning.
That's good.
That is good. That was excellent. Outside of that, make sure you're following the Kings Beat. Give us a subscription. And premium subscribers to the Kings Beat, I will make the announcement right now. May 26th from 5:30 to 7:30 is Off the Record with the Kings Beat Virtual Happy Hour Part 6, The Voice.
Oh, that makes me happy. I know.
Legendary Kings announcer Gary Gerald will join the show and hang out with us while we get drunk, and he, of course, does not, because he doesn't partake in the alcohol, really. But we will
go straight to heroin.
Black tar heroin. You just said that about Gary Gerald. How disrespectful, Sean Cunningham. So Gary Gerald is going to join the happy hour. That, of course, is only for premium subscribers to the Kings Beat. So jump on board now so you can get the invite for the virtual happy hour, where we will zoom this thing up, and the incredible Gary Gerald will join the show, and we will have a really good time. Of course, it's off the record. We don't record it.
Yeah.
All that stuff.
What's that date again?
May 26th from 5:30 to 7:30.
I know, we're just finding out about this, Sean. I wrote it down, too.
It's next Thursday.
That's right before Bottle Rock. I'm going to be good and lubed. Let's go.
Oh, let's go. Let's go. All right, outside of that, we do have actual basketball news. The Sacramento Kings have hired an associate head coach under Mike Brown. And for today's sort of like profile, the coaching profile, Brenden, let's turn it over to you. What do you got for us?
Yeah, Jordi Fernandez is a guy that's worked pretty closely with Mike Brown for a while now. Their relationship is definitely interesting. And just on Fernandez himself, he spent 7 years as a player development coach with the Cavs before he joined Mike Malone in Denver as an assistant from 2016 until this most recent season, where he'll now be joining the Kings. But originally, Jordi Fernandez was a counselor at Impact Sports, and in the summer of 2009, kind of ran into Mike Brown, where he was coaching Mike Brown's son Elijah at a camp, and Mike Brown was kind of impressed with what he saw and pretty much quickly made an offer to him that was for a furnished apartment, $500 a month, and the ability to drive his Range Rover, that Fernandez could leave Spain, where he was working towards a doctorate's degree, and be Elijah, his son's personal coach, and the coach for his AAU team, and also kind of function as Mike Brown's personal assistant. And did that for about a year, and because of that, Mike Brown was, at the time, the head coach of the Cleveland Cavs, and Fernandez was kind of around Brown at the facility. And story goes, at one point, that Jordi Fernandez was working out one of Cleveland's draft prospects they were considering, and I forget what general manager it was at the time, kind of came into Mike Brown, and Mike Brown said he was expecting to kind of get a what the hell is this guy doing? Why is he working out our players? But instead it was more of a, this guy really knows what he's doing. I think we should bring him onto the staff. And Jordi Fernandez ended up doing that. Mike Brown funnily kind of said, I didn't have to pay him anymore, so of course I'm going to put him on Cleveland's payroll. And then Jordi Fernandez ends up sticking around in Cleveland even longer than Mike Brown did. But Jordi Fernandez was there both times that Mike Brown was a head coach in Cleveland, and like I said, was under Mike Malone in Denver since 2016 all the way until this most recent season, and now he'll be joining Mike Brown on the Kings. But interesting ties, definitely a close relationship.
Yeah, he's also part of the coaching staff on the Nigerian national team with Mike Brown, right? So that's also the tie that binds. Sean, what do you got?
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that because it was 2020 during the Summer Olympics, and I actually was down in Oakland covering a good portion of the Nigerian team because there was a ton of players before they really whittled it down to the Olympic roster that were from the Sacramento area. Obviously, Chimezi Metu made the team, but you had guys like Gabe Vincent and Ike Iriegbu, who's from Elk Grove. You've got Chima Moneki who played at UC Davis. So you have all these guys. I think of like the entire roster, and if you remember, they had also just beaten the U.S. team in the scrimmage. And in Vegas, I think it was in Vegas, but they had just come back to Oakland after beating the U.S. And you think of Nigeria, all these people in the country, right? And you have so many of them. There was like 5 or 6 of them that had come from the Northern California area or had ties to this. I mean, Festus Ezeli was kind of a part of it, guy who went to Yuba City High School, played with the Warriors, lives in Sacramento, has family in Sacramento, Jesuit High School before that. It was interesting to see, and Mike Brown was the coach of that, and that was one of the first times I'd actually been around Jordi, and I remember telling him at a time because Matthew Dellavedova would just sing his praises, talking about player development and how much Jordi, who came from Impact, because I remember being when Summer League was a little bit different than what it is now in Vegas, you could just wander into Impact and you'd have a Kings player working out there or any other NBA player working out there, and it was just kind of a way to just kind of set up and see if there's a way to talk to some of these people or kind of get some insight. So my connects at Impact, I didn't know Jordi at the time, but it was a kind of an open door, just come on in. And much like a lot of these gyms or UFC gyms for mixed martial arts. So it was very inviting. The culture was great there, and that was during that time. Now, I didn't know Jordi then. I didn't meet Jordi until later in the NBA, but had a moment with him with the Nigerian team, and of course, all these guys that I've come in contact with speak highly of him. And as a matter of fact, yesterday, I can share this, actually spoke with Mike Brown for a little while after the game in San Francisco, and congratulated him on the job, all that stuff, and immediately started talking about Jordi and just singing his praises. While I didn't ask Mike, hey, who else are you going to have on your staff? I just didn't think it would be appropriate given the setting. He told me, man, I've got a really good crew coming in, and it sounded like it was pretty much final. So be nice to hear some other names trickle out. I think they'll probably do it in one fell swoop after the season, but I think they wanted to make this Jordi hire different because this will be his associate head coach. So, looking forward to seeing what the roster looks like of the coaching staff for sure.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that we get the associate head coaches hired now, and I think the important part about that is he can start establishing what's happening behind the scenes here in Sacramento, while Mike Brown is continuing to go on in the playoffs. So I think that's a nice way to look at this. That of course the Cavs season, the Nuggets season is over, so he's free to move about the country, and I assume that he's gonna set up home base quickly and start moving through things and start developing a plan here for player workouts and start managing the team workouts as players come through. To my knowledge, as of, again, yesterday, current assistant coaches have not been told one way or another whether they'll be back or not. I have no idea. And that goes for any of them that I've been able to talk to. So I'm going to guess that most of them will not be back, but there might be one or two holdovers. We'll have to see how that goes. But I think Mike Brown should be able to hire his own staff, and that's something that I always preach. It's something that is written into almost every coaching contract, outside of one or two that you can say, hey, look, this has been a person who's been around the franchise for a while, or this has been a person who's done this, and this, and can you at least like consider bringing them on the staff? So I think we're in for like an interesting couple of days here, or a couple of weeks, while we figure out what's going to happen to the remaining Sacramento Kings staff. Jordi Fernandez, is he he was a defensive coach in Denver, right?
I know he had worked he was part of that. I know Michael has his blueprint all over that. I mean, if you remember going back to, Michael being this defensive coach, I think Jordi was somebody that Michael gave freedom to try to teach the defensive system and take ownership of, while Michael has his attention drawn in so many different places. So I think just by default, but it was clear, I think it's pretty clear that that's a Michael system. But that will be interesting because, you go for a guy who doesn't really have, maybe, I think if he's to hang his hat on one thing, it's definitely player development, but certainly filling the roles of, okay, we're going to come over here and call out, or if Michael has something in film room that needs to be emphasized, Jordy's going to be the one to do it individually with players and as a group as well when they're going over strategies. So I know he took ownership of the role, but it's definitely a Michael system.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting because you look at what Denver does, and to be honest, it's the reason why I liked, maybe kicking the tires on David Adelman, because they have a system centered around a big man, and so I really do think that like in the modern NBA, you're going to have a lot of sets that you can throw anybody into, but when you have somebody who's been around and sat there and game planned, time and time again around a specific type of player, it's probably good to bring in a coach that, when you have a similar type of player. So, of course, Jokic and Sabonis being similar types, not the same, but similar. And I think they're the fact that you can run offenses through them, the fact that they block shots, but they aren't like true natural shot blocker or rim protectors. You're talking more about like defensive players. Well, I'll even say this: like Jokic's like improvement on the defensive end is stunning. Like what they've been able to do there with Jokic is nuts. I mean, he's a player that you don't think of as a defensive player because he's so good offensively, but he is really good defensively. And so it's about playing to players' strengths and stuff like that. And I think it's sort of what we're seeing from Brown and from this hire, right? So you look at the Golden State Warriors. How in the world did the Golden State Warriors finish with the number one defensive rating in the NBA when you've got Steph Curry, who's never been known as a great defender? He can defend, but he's not a quote unquote great defender. You got Klay Thompson, who's coming back after missing more than 900 days. You've got no natural shot blocker. Draymond Green missed a huge portion of the season, and sure enough, here they are, scheming their way to a top defensive rating. So I do like that because, let's be honest, the Kings are the worst of the worst of the worst when it comes to defense. So I think that this is a good hire. It makes a lot of sense. I want to see who else is brought in because we do need to see some offensive creativity and stuff like that. And I think that that's an important piece to this. And, that's where we go next, right? Who do they bring in to really run the offense on this team?
Absolutely. I think the things you point out of Denver and Golden State kind of overperforming defensively for their personnel is something that obviously hope translates to Sacramento, and the Jokic comparison for Sabonis is intriguing as well. I do want to kind of go back and look at a little bit more of Denver games and kind of how they schemed that, because again, while Jokic does have size on Sabonis when it comes to height and length, they both are not athletic in a typical speed way. They don't have great movement and still totally able to make everything work there. And even offensively, obviously there's what Jokic does, and Sabonis kind of falls into a bit of the same when it comes to running offense through a big, but you can also say the same with Golden State with running offense through Draymond Green. and just running offense through a big. So coming from two systems, both Jordi Fernandez and Mike Brown, that I think have translatable things to what Sacramento's roster currently is intriguing and promising to me.
Plus, I think it's good, like, again, being a player development guy, this franchise needs sort of a base. They really do need, like, someone has to set up like a game plan for development, especially when you have the number 4 pick in the draft and you got 2 second-round picks. The development has not been there. Robert Woodard did not develop. Jamias Ramsey did not develop. And it's not that those guys are expected to be roster players, but you can't miss almost every single time in the second round. At some point you have to develop somebody. And, like the best player the Kings have drafted, like one of their best draft picks that they've had in the last, say, 10 years is Gary Trent Jr., who they just sold to...
Gave him away. They gave him away.
They gave him away to Portland for no reason. I think they got another second-round pick down the road, but it didn't work out. And
Xavier Tillman is in there, too.
Oh, yeah. Good one for Memphis, yeah.
Yeah, these guys that the Kings just flat out missed on, that were there and that they even had their hands on. And so you need somebody to establish what it is to get better and to a path for a player to improve. And I'll even say this: you can go get yourself like some of these young players and that are restricted free agents or non-restricted free agents. Let's just talk about like the Martin twins. I think, like, if the Kings landed both Martin twins this offseason, they would be a better team. None of them are going to they're not going to average 20 points a game. They're not going to blow you away. What they're going to do is they're going to be gritty. They're going to play defense. They're going to pass the ball. One of them shot, I think it's 38.4% from 3. One of them shot 41.4% from 3. It's kind of what you need, these utility players, right? But if you bring those guys in and you got a guy coming from the Miami Heat, school of thought, and who's being, brought up in a system and really developed, if you just stop development and just expect him to continue to be the player or to get better and not regress, then you're making a big mistake. And that's where the Kings continuously do this. Like, why do players look better somewhere else than they do in Sacramento? Well, a lot of it is development. A lot of them is putting them in the position to succeed. So I'm really hoping that that's what Jordi Fernandez and what sort of the path that we're heading down. It's about bringing players in that you can develop, continue to develop, and actually make them viable and be NBA players down the road.
The one thing I felt like they've done a better job in over the past couple seasons, and it was sorely needed, and we've talked about it, James, at length, but it's just adding professionals in basketball IQ. You know what I mean? Like, that's why we always talk about, like, young teams typically don't win, and young teams typically don't have the degree of success coming in because they don't know any better. But sometimes you can use that to your benefit, I suppose. But really, it comes down to me of just professional basketball, and I think it. I remember talking. I used to have especially when it came to the draft, I used to have this small school bias where, I wouldn't. It's like, man, why did that guy go to Weber State? If he's so good, why did he go to Weber State? If he's so good, why is he at Davidson or Western Carolina or something like that? Again, there's so many moments that you can point to, and that shows that people can go to these programs and excel in the NBA even still be even someone like Kawhi Leonard, San Diego State, not this like basketball powerhouse, right? So you learn from your mistakes with that, but I also feel in doing so, much like staying in college a little bit longer, it seasons you. You get to know a program better, and it translates better to the NBA because you learn systems and you learn how to adapt, and it's not this everything's flying at you and you're just going off of raw natural talent, and no matter what happens, you're going to be taken care of when you get to the NBA because you've been heralded for so long. So that's why something like Memphis, if you look around, like John Morant famously went to Murray State for a reason. So somebody who ascends like Desmond Bane, you're talking about programs that are not the most not the ones that leap off the page when it comes to basketball in general, in terms of being these blue bloods or these powerhouse conferences or powerhouse teams. So I think there's a little bit something to that. And I think we're kind of seeing this shift in the NBA, not so much that they're going to avoid the Dukes, Kentuckys, and North Carolinas and things like that, but that you're kind of, you better be really good. You better have like a huge high ceiling if you're going to draft somebody so short or so small from a smaller school and so high, and give them the time to really kind of grow. And you hope you have a culture that can give them the time necessary.
Yeah, and I would point out too that one of the biggest issues that you have in the NBA is that players come into teams that are bad teams. Like high draft picks go to bad teams, and it's really hard to tell somebody like, look, I need you to do this, this, and this. You're not going to be Michael Jordan. You're going to be a really, really good, solid role player, and I need you to work on that. And it's something that I think for years the Kings have struggled with, because they're always a bad team. And when you get to a bad team, you think, oh, okay, well, they're bad. I can probably do more here than I can somewhere else. Like, I'm not going to be painted into a corner. I'm not going to be put in a box. And so, again, like 7 years into his career, Jason Thompson was still asking, like, when am I going to get to, like, shoot 12 times a game? Like, I should be shooting 12 times a game. And the answer is, like, Jason Thompson, you're never shooting 12 times a game. You're not shooting 12 times a game in Turkey or China. That's not who you should be. But because you're a bad team, you're not able to establish sort of like a hierarchy a lot of times, because everyone is mediocre and you're not very good. And so you have this problem that guys get deep into their careers and still have this weird belief that they can be someone better than what they really should be, and who don't focus on being really good the way that they should be at what they do. Like, let's improve you a little bit on your ball handling, but I really need you to be a rebounder and a shot blocker. Those are your roles. Now, if I can stretch you out and shoot it and have you start shooting threes, that's great. Now I can add that element to your game. But this is like player development over years, and the Kings just don't have this. It's something that's been missing from this team for a long time, and it's not intentional. But at the same time, this is where I think they have to get it right, especially when you have a pick like so high in the draft, and you still have all your picks, and you need to develop players the right way. But sometimes it's good to go out and get role players, but you get role players who instantly come in like, I want to be more than what I am here because I'm on the Kings. I'm no longer on the Bucks, where I'm the fifth guy in the starting lineup. I'm now on the Kings, where number one, I should be a starter, but number two, I should be a really good starter. I should be able to do more than what I was able to do as a fifth starter for the Bucks. I should be a third starter here because this team isn't very good. And so I think it's really hard to define roles when you're a team like the Kings and a franchise like the Kings that continue to struggle.
Yeah, I think Dante's a great example. Like you just pointed out, I think of like Jeremy Grant too. Had other reasons for going to Detroit as well, outside of just roster and an increased role. But when he goes to a team like that from place like he was at in Denver, it's like, okay, this is an opportunity to expand my game on a lesser roster pretty much, and show that I can do a little bit more. And I think sometimes that pays off, and guys show that they do have that ability to add more to their game than maybe they were allowed in different places. But it's about picking your moments to do that and not stepping on other people's toes and going out there and just kind of being fully focused on yourself. And I think it kind of all circles back to the idea of a culture that Sacramento hasn't really had, at least a positive culture established for the past decade plus, outside of maybe one or two teams here and there that didn't stick around. So I think that it kind of all circles back around to that, and being willing to fall into your role is so much easier when you're actually seeing the value of that role because wins are coming in. When you're winning 30 games, it's easy to say, okay, this is the area that teams need to be better at. If I was just allowed to do a little bit more, then I could help with that. And sometimes people do a little bit too much. So I think it kind of all circles back to culture.
Culture, and I would even say it's consistency. Because, if you're sitting there busting your tail for Dave Yeager's staff and they're asking you to do X, Y, and Z, And then Dave Yeager loses his job, and you got Luke Walton, who no longer wants you to do X, Y, and Z. He wants you to do A, B, and C. Now you've just wasted time. Like, that's the continuity of a franchise is a problem. Building off of something and having someone like start at one point and know that they're going to be under the same head coach or the same system for a certain amount of time, and they can start to become experts in that system. Like De'Aaron Fox, for example. I mean, this is going to be his, fourth head coach in year 6. And that's not easy, especially when you're supposed to be the star of the team. It's like, this is who we want you to be, but then, hey, this other guy wants you to be something a little bit different. And there's no like clear path. It's not like when you go to college and your freshman year, you got to take these courses. Your sophomore year, you got to take these courses, and you go into upper division. And then your senior year, you got to make sure you finish. And all of a sudden, you should have somewhat of a finished product. And then if you're going to go to grad school and get better and stuff, like, there is no system in place to show consistent growth. And for these guys to actually know where they need to be from year 1 to year 7 and what is expected, because the expectations consistently change. The only thing consistent in Sacramento is inconsistency.
Yeah, well, and to that point too, I mean, you have a new head coach coming in, and you mentioned De'Aaron Fox. How about Davion Mitchell? I mean, he's now got his 3rd head coach, and he's not even into his sophomore season in the NBA. But you're right, James. I mean, look, that's just sports. I mean, you think about it in football, it's actually worse in football. You know, if you're a quarterback or a receiver, running back, whatever, maybe you go from a running team to all of a sudden personnel changes, coaching changes, and now you're trying to do something different. It's so tough. And make no mistake, Mike Brown is coming in. He's going to do stuff that's vastly different than what Luke Walton did, and probably a lot different than what even Alvin Gentry. So what player becomes a victim of that? And I'll just throw one out there. Terrence Davis. Terrence Davis might find himself out of a rotation, possibly. Someone like Rashawn Holmes, depending upon how depending on how the roster looks, especially with the addition of Sabonis, you already saw him coming off the bench. His role could dramatically look different depending upon what they do. So, and they may ask him to do different things. They may tell him, we don't want you to set a high screen anymore. We want you to be on the block. We want you to be on the, patrol the baseline as opposed to come out to the high post. So I don't know. There's a lot of different variables that come into play, but that's where the whole professionalism comes in. These guys need to, you bring in people who are able to adapt to different programs that just don't succeed in one specific type of program, be it high-paced or, stand in the corner or run a Princeton offense, whatever it may be. You hope that they're able to flourish in different systems. So that's up to the coaching staff, but it's not going to be. It's going to be the same thing where you're going to have people come in and you will have a different mindset and a different philosophy, and it definitely can affect players.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is like the 4th or I want to say 5th different defensive coach in the last 5 years. Maybe not even 5 years. Probably less than that. Right. I mean, it's crazy.
You can have the defensive coach. You need defensive players or people who are willing to do it to go with it. So,
well, and I mean, again, I think consistent messaging and building off of the next year that does actually help. Like, continuity does actually help, and so you hope that you haven't ruined some of these guys by like giving them so many muddled messages that at the end of the day they think they know what you want, and it might be similar to what some other coach wanted, but maybe it's totally different. And, it's not just the Kings, because Domantas Sabonis is coming to the team with he's played for so many head coaches. It's crazy. I think he's played for 5 and maybe this will be his 6th. And so bouncing around the league too, that doesn't help you. But then again, sometimes it does. I mean, it does. I think we had these conversations with Justin Holiday, who had been traded mid-season multiple times. And so he actually knows okay, I got to go out here and learn the basics, and then I'm ready to go. But that's a player who's used to it. And I guess maybe if you are Fox and Sabonis, you have gotten used to it. But I also think that you can maybe not play to 100% of your talent level because there's always the excuse that you didn't really have like a straight line of education. And so, yeah, I think it's going to be interesting. It's again, Jordi Fernandez for me is a good first step. Like Brenden, I think we're all slightly disappointed that like none of the young guys made it to the second round. So the Will Hardys, Darvin Hams, Charles Lee. Does this make you feel a little bit better that they got Mike Brown, but then they went out and got one of these young up and coming guys?
Yeah, and Fernandez was kind of considered for Cleveland's opening when it was available a couple of years ago, and I don't know how far he got in those conversations or anything, but I think it's interesting because I think I really started to be intrigued by the young coaching candidates, partially because they could be phenomenal coaches, and we kind of know with these other ones in experience that they're probably not amazing, with Mike Brown maybe being the exception, right, in the 6 years previously that he's just spent with Golden State. So yeah, it is intriguing to me. I mean, I think that Mike Brown can have his own longevity and be head coach for a long time if things do work out. He's still fairly young. So I think there is an intrigue with Jordi Fernandez being on the younger side, that like maybe he is next up if Mike Brown decides to eventually move on down the line for whatever sort of reason. It's intriguing to me, but I think that a lot of my reasons that I was kind of advocating for one of the younger candidates previously was just like, well, they could be amazing, and we know that the other ones, the other candidates of like Steve Clifford and Mark Jackson, like probably are not, based on having a previous track record that we've already been able to see. And maybe Mike Brown can be a phenomenal coach with what he's shown in the past, and we've never seen him work with this type of roster and having the 6 years, like I said, with Golden State. So it doesn't, at this point, I've kind of already accepted, I guess, that it's not one of the younger coaches at the top, but I guess having a head assistant that's on the younger side is nice.
You know what it is? I see this because there's so many people that I think they love the intrigue of a younger coach, because it's like, it's like opening a Christmas present, right? You don't know what's inside. It could be really fucking good. It could be really bad. Who knows? But you're hoping you're not getting socks, right? And I think there's people that know that at the end of the day, you've got a box, like, you already know what Mike Brown is. And again, I'll remind people, like, the reason I look at the 7 and said, yeah, Mike that's the guy I'd go with. You know, I think he gets a pretty bad rap. You know, I'm not trying to be this Mike Brown apologist, but it's like his successes aren't. It's like, oh well, you coached LeBron James, right? Like he had nothing to do with that. I mean, you look at
Larry
some of those
Hughes
teams.
was his second best player.
Yeah, I mean, and then everyone famously remembers the Lakers thing. It, like, the first year was okay; it went fine. I think Kings fans would love a 40 win team at that point. Kobe gives him that look in the second season. He's gone, and they go in a different direction. So yeah, you've got. I think the pressure of coaching an absolute, not just a superstar player, but a generational superstar like Kobe Bryant and LeBron James brings a pressure that is crazy. Especially when you are an OCD system type of coach, where you're bringing so many details to everything, as Mike Brown does, and he knows that can be a tough thing for some of these superstars, especially when they're used to something different. You know, Kobe famously coming from a Phil Jackson type of system where, you know, things are obviously a little bit different. But again, you're talking about a guy who's won over 50 or more games several times in his career, and he only has 2 seasons where they're losing records, and one of them it's a 1-5 record. So I think because people look at that and they know, well, we've seen Mike Brown didn't win a championship. We've seen the likes of Steve Clifford. We've seen the bottled potential of hope, and just hope of, well, we haven't seen what this guy can do as a head coach. Let's see. It could be entirely worse. But people will look at that potential, much like a draft prospect, James, because you really haven't seen it in the NBA level. Mm-hmm. And it's like, oh, this could be something. Why not take a shot at this when that can just as easily blow up in your face?
Yeah, I mean,
I can't believe I said the F word too. By the way, that was a slip.
He dropped an F bomb. We'll have to mark the check.
How dare you?
Mark. Yeah.
Yeah. Usually, it's just nod Sean.
I got a little too comfortable.
You got a little too comfortable. Okay, so I'm gonna add this last piece to this, and we'll kind of scoot on. I also like that Jordi Fernandez is like he's the Mike Brown coaching tree. Like most of these other guys, like we can trace all these coaching trees to different people. This is a guy that Mike Brown found. He's a guy that worked under Mike Brown for a long time, that went on to go work under another head coach in Michael Malone and earn his keep there and earn his way up through the system, learn something new from different people, learn from guys, again, like Michael Malone, but also from David Adelman and from all the other coaches that have come through there, with the Wes Unseld Juniors, all of those guys that have come through there in Denver. So this is a guy that we talked about this with Luke Walton. He was super uncomfortable with his group that first year. And I think it hurt the team. I think it hurt their ability to win games. Just there was no flow, no feel for each other. And versus the Dave Yeager or, again, the George Karl, which was even more different. That was more of a bunch of like George Karl, like follower guys. Like all of these are different ways that you can build out a franchise, out a coaching staff. But for me, what I like about it is this is someone that Mike Brown is going to be super comfortable with. And it's someone that will be his sounding board, his right-hand man. And so I think that that's good, because when you're a team that's starting over yet again, having one message, having that message come from the top, having that message disseminated through people he trusts, that's a huge, huge deal. And so I think this is a good hire. Maybe we'll find out more about Jordi as time goes by, about what type of coach he is and what kind of style and all that stuff. But for right now, I think it's this is probably the first true limb of it's one of the first limbs of the Mike Brown coaching tree that we're seeing added, and I think that's a good thing.
I'll admit I'm a little surprised that he was the associate, because I expected that associate head coach to have actual some head coaching experience. So I do think it's bold. That's not to say there won't be another member of the staff that has head coaching experience. So I applaud the boldness of it. It did surprise me that he would be named the associate, though.
And
question
that it came out on Twitter. Go ahead, Brenden.
Question for you guys when it comes to building out a coaching staff like this and what Mike Brown is currently doing. Like, the two things that stand out to me as what's important in that we've kind of already talked about is them having a pre-built relationship and a trust among themselves. And also just coming from various backgrounds, right? Looking at the game with maybe a little bit of a different eye and being able to piece everything kind of together. What are the other standout important things to you guys when it comes to building a coaching staff and the relationship that these guys should have among each other?
I've seen so many different coaching staffs, and like you have your guys that are climbers that are going to be head coaches. You have your guys that are strictly player development guys. You have your guys that, there's always, like Ryan Bowen. Like, he's a guy that, like, he's a good guy to have on your staff because he's kind of a glue guy. He's a guy that everyone likes. He's a guy that can work with, different styles of players. But at the same time, like, this team needs, like, they need a big man coach. Like, somebody asked me, yesterday on Twitter, like, should the Kings look at Hakeem Olajuwon to work with Sabonis so he can be more of a back to the basket guy? And I thought to myself, oh no, that's crazy. But then, again, Hakeem Olajuwon does actually work with players, or he did. I remember when he worked with Hassan Whiteside one summer. Hassan spent a whole season with him, a whole off season. I'm not sure that was the season that Hassan picked up the four-step post move.
He was convinced it wasn't a travel. He wanted to show everyone.
It was a travel.
It was very much a travel.
Yeah.
It was like two travels.
It might have been 3 travels. But like, sure. Like even a guy like Domantas Sabonis, who's 25, 26. I think did he just turn 26? I think he did. But a guy like Sabonis, who not only has he been in the league and refining some of the things he does, but he's also the son of an absolute basketball legend. And so he does have like plenty of stuff in his bag, but that doesn't mean he can't get better on his jump hooks. He can't add another little wiggle to his post moves, because I have watched him like in the post and thought, that didn't look that smooth. So yeah, you need a good big man coach. You need a guy who, again, a guy like Doug, who can tie people together in different ways and make people think about the game in different ways and break down players in a different way, but also have really good conversations off the court that keep people engaged and in the flow and what's happening. So I think there are so many different ways to build out a staff, but again, we've seen it. I think having 1 or 2 former NBA players is a good thing. I think having 1 or 2 young guys who have brilliant minds and who are coming up in the game and learning it a different way, guys like Jonah Hershque, who like sees the game in a different way because he hasn't been brought up in it, where he's a player like the whole time, and then all of his stuff is jaded by sort of the old school way of thinking of basketball. Like he's a guy who probably can use analytics in a different way than an old school coach can. So yeah, I think there are a lot of different ways to build a staff, but it's kind of an open book, right? An open way that you can do. There's so many different ways that you can do it, and I don't think there's a wrong way. And the only time I did think that there was a wrong way was the Luke Walton staff, where he tried to do something different and got a bunch of people he didn't know.
And the Kurt Rambis thing with Michael Malone.
Yeah.
These things happen. And Brenden, I think everything that James said is pretty spot on. I think that's kind of like the baseline, but more than anything, more than what these coaches can bring to the team, experience, former players, hungry assistants, you need everyone on the same page.
Yes.
And everybody has to be not only on the same page, but they have to have every belief and confidence in the head coach. Like everything comes back to your head coach. That's why head coaches hire people that they know and they've worked with and they're comfortable with, and that's why you can't have anybody usurping the head coach or trying to speak out of both sides of their mouths, or the whole. If there's a player that doesn't like the head coach, there can't be this assistant that goes, "Hey man, I know, blah blah blah, we're gonna make this work." It's like, no man, the head coach, his word is bond here. This is what we're doing. So that more than anything, having that confidence, having that structure, almost like you've got your general and then you have your captains, whatever the. I'm not a military guy, so I don't really know the lieutenants and all that thing. What the power order is there, but everybody just needs to funnel back to the head coach to give him the ultimate authority and it be that voice, and you are just another mouthpiece of your head coach. Now you can certainly have your own identity and be unique and all that, and you can have creativity, but as important it is to support your head coach, you also don't want a bunch of yes men around you. So it's a really odd dynamic, because you want people to challenge you as a head coach. You want people to make you better as a head coach. But at the end of the day, what the head coach says goes. And the head coach needs to be left alone. He needs to work in conjunction with the front office and ownership, but he needs to be left alone to coach his team. So that's one thing I'm going to be very interested to see as this thing plays out with Mike Brown, who's known for such structure, discipline, and having these systems and having a lot of detail, because that is, when you have a coach like that, you really have to be left alone, and it's going to take time. So who knows if there's the patience, but certainly they're going in this direction, and it's a different bit of it's a little bit more akin to what Dave Yeager had. Dave Yeager, I felt, had a brilliant system. I think he had a nice structure of guys that would help enable him as a head coach, but also he would delegate and guys had roles, and he did a brilliant job of that. I mean, Steve Kerr told me one time, he says, everybody steals from Dave, and it's not just his in-game coaching. It's not just his, it's so many different things that he brings to the table, so many different systems, so many different ways of communication. He obviously, he likes to use the term love on his guys. Like he tries to give them and hype them up a lot, and he doesn't like to necessarily kill them in the media, but he can call a spade at the end of the day as well. So there's a fine line coaches have to draw, but I think a long-winded way of answering your question, Brenden, I think that is even more so than anything a coach's experience, anything that they bring to the table from an X's and O's standpoint.
Yeah, I'll add this too, just for context, like with Dave Yeager, early in his first season, Aaron Aflalo was playing so poorly on the defensive end that I actually called him a sieve in a piece. And but the thing was that we had talked to Aaron Aflalo that day that I wrote that piece, and he admitted to being absolutely atrocious on the defensive end. He said, I don't know what's going on, but I'm playing really bad on the defensive end. So I call him a sieve. We get to the next practice the next day, and the media director pulled me aside and said, hey, Dave wants to talk to you afterwards. I'm like, okay. So I went over to the side with Dave, and Dave said, hey, man, a sieve? Is Aflalo a sieve? Is it that bad? That's pretty harsh, man. And I said, well, he admitted to it yesterday that he's been absolutely atrocious. I'm like, I can get you the quote. And he goes, okay, so he admitted that? And I'm like, yeah. He's like, okay. Well, look, I'm just looking out for my guy. You can critique him, but if you're going to call him a sieve, that means he's just letting everybody go right through him. And I'm like, okay. I'm like, as long as we're on the same page. So it was like that moment of accountability between all of us. And I thought that was a good way for Dave to, number one, build relationships with media members, but also make sure that he's protecting his guys. And so there was always, what I liked about Dave is there was one voice at the top, but then all of his guys had individual voices. They were all just they weren't enablers for the players. They all had a voice, they all had a plan, but they were fun to talk to. They all had incredible basketball stories, but at the end of the day, when it came to why is this guy playing or this guy, it was all about those are coaching decisions, those are Dave's decisions, and we're not going to question him. We're going to support him in the way that we should. And, even guys like Brian Gates that weren't part of that family, they became family. And, Jason March and those guys, I think he was part of the family from Memphis when he came over. But, there are a lot of different ways to do this, but what you can't have is player enablers. You can't have people who are going behind the coach's back and saying, yeah, man, he's doing you wrong, because they got family members that are doing that, and you got to cut that stuff out from that as well. But you also have to have guys that can take the language, or a coach can yell at a player, and a player he's making a mistake because he doesn't know why, and he doesn't know why he's making the mistake or what exactly the mistake is. So you need a coach who, after the head coach yells at him and screams at him and tells him this, and this, can go over and say, now let's get on the floor and let's fix what just happened, because I think you don't understand what you did wrong, and I'm going to show you what you did wrong, and this is how he wants it done. So I think it's this is a really cool discussion that I didn't expect us to have today, to dive this deep into how you build a staff. But because we're in Sacramento, and this is what I think the 9th head coach I've had. Well, 9 head coaches and probably 30 something assistants.
I'm somehow on head coach 3, guys.
You're Davion Mitchell.
Yeah, you are. Yeah. So, all right, let's skip ahead. Sorry if we got too deep into discussion on coaches and everything else, but I do think it's a really cool discussion.
I'm not sorry.
Yeah, you're not sorry. And I think it leads us to a different discussion. We're not going to like stick on this for very long. We talked about it. I talked about it on the radio yesterday. We talked about it on the pod for quite a bit. But the situation where Vivek has placed his daughter as the assistant general manager of the Stockton Kings, it's something that like we continue, both Sean and I, and maybe Brenden in his discussions as well. We just continue to get this reaction from the outside and from the inside and from like all over the place. Sean, what do you got?
Well, I mean, it's always interesting no matter what the Kings do, especially if it doesn't go over well from a media standpoint, because a lot of these things that happen tend to coincide with the Warriors playoffs. And
just a reminder.
Yeah. So when I mean, for people who don't know, when the Kings season's over, we start covering the Warriors because they're in the playoffs, and it's still Northern California, Bay Area, and like it or not, Sacramento has a ton of Warriors fans, and you could almost argue that there's probably more Warrior fans in this Sacramento, Stockton, Modesto, Yuba City, Vacaville area than you have than Kings fans. Probably more Warrior fans at this point because of the success. And so going down there for the past, I mean, there was no playoffs for the last 2 years for the Warriors, but going down there for all these NBA Finals runs is always interesting time because you see a lot of national media, you see a lot of folks from the Bay, and yesterday was almost the peak moment of this because it was just a day after the hiring of Anjali Ranadivé, who becomes the assistant GM for the Stockton Kings. And you would think that I made the hire because, like, every time I turn a corner and there's somebody I know, they're just like, "What?" Like they're looking at me. I'm the vent, like as if like I work for the organization or something. And it's like, well, don't tell me, tell them. Like gosh, man, I'm just the messenger here. I just reported the news. I just know what I know, reported what I know, and. But it is funny because you'll just see like, what are they thinking? What are you guys doing in Sacramento? I'm like, you guys. First of all, you guys check that. I'm not you guys. I am. I just covered the team for 2 decades, so it's pretty wild, man. It's not a move that has gone over well. But if they wanted to make a splash, the whole no bad publicity or no, what is it? Bad publicity is still publicity, whatever.
No publicity is bad publicity.
Right. Yeah, man. They're definitely taking advantage of that. So it's still something that has this polarizing reaction among people. And
is it polarizing? Has anybody felt good about it?
No, that's probably a good point, Brenden. Yeah, it's probably not polarizing.
You know what I mean? Like, hasn't everybody had the same reaction?
No, polarizing in the sense that it's definitely something that people react to, and it's definitely like it or not, you're being spoken about. It's not good. It's not, the majority of it is not good, but you're being talked about, and then you get the 4th pick in the draft. Then you move up on the same day and get the 4th pick in the draft.
I think Brendan's point is that I don't think anyone has come out and thought this was a good idea. Like, everyone is on one side of this news. Am I wrong? Yeah. Yeah. So, I'll say, I think I got 3 things. Number one, I like someone I trust in the business. Their text me was so disrespectful because there are so many people who have worked their lives to try to get to that point, who have spent 10 years or 5 years working through film rooms and, who have spent so much time trying to earn one of those positions. And just like, a head coach in the NBA, there really are only like maybe not even 20 assistant general manager positions at the G League level. Not every team has one. Every team has a GM of some sort, but so that was one thing. The second thing I was told by someone else was, does anyone believe that was Monty McNair's hire? Because if they think that was Monty McNair's hire, then, they have some like property to sell them, some oceanfront property in Arizona. They'd like to sell them. So that tells you that if Monty McNair didn't make this decision, that he, again, doesn't have authority to make those decisions in his own front office. So that's a problem. And outside of that, it's nepotism, it's everything else. It's just, I think that it was handled poorly. Like you could have gone a different direction where you wouldn't have had this type of like visceral reaction. You could have given her a position that did the same exact thing, but didn't feel the same way initially. And I think Vivek has to have, his succession plan in place, and succession plan in place, like to what's going to happen next, like for him and his family. And again, bringing your kids into the organization is like a time honored, like thing that happens in the NBA. But I think there's a way to handle it. And this was just another moment where Vivek brought bad publicity to himself and caused himself another self-inflicted wound. And that's what this is. It's self-inflicted.
And it was the most obvious reaction. Like, you have to have known that this is what was going to happen. Like there's already been a lot of talk about, coming right off the Mark Jackson and Mike Brown conversation of Vivek wants one, and the idea being that the front office wants a different candidate, and kind of his meddling, and he could have just changed the title so it doesn't sound as like assistant general manager has a weight to it. Poor timing, and you have to have known what was coming.
I would say this: if I was playing damage control over there, and I was, I don't know. For all we know, this may have been a situation that happens. But James, if we had said, again, they haven't announced their staff. The team hasn't even officially announced it. Granted, she's got it on her bio, on her social media platforms, but and it's definitely true. But I'm just saying, like, would it make people feel better if they hired 2 assistant GMs and she's one of them? Would it, not to say they will, they probably won't, but if they did, and even if they don't, there's no, I get it. Like, to me, I get asked a lot because I'm trying to show kind of both sides of it, right? Where it's like you draw the picture of, yes, it's still just the G League, and it's titles are what they are. They are important, but at the end of the day, like, we've seen some pretty gnarly titles come out of the Sacramento Kings, so we kind of illustrate that as well. So even if she had the responsibilities of an assistant head coach, but they called it something like director of basketball engagement, whatever the hell that was for Alvin Gentry, like, does that lessen the blow? I almost in this circumstance, I almost feel better about the fact that you're saying that she's an assistant GM because she's going to be doing those duties. If you had said her job title is this, but her function is what the assistant GM title functions are, it just has a different title to it, do people feel differently? So again, like, it's this back and forth. Is it an absurd hire? Probably. Given the experience, we get it. And I feel, James, you're not the only one. I've shared some messages that I was getting in responses that were just crazy, and I understand those. There's literally one that I can share here that said, I'm paraphrasing, but it was that organization doesn't respect the jobs of which we do. Shame on them. And I get it. Like, I get it, but it's almost it's a little bit indicative, or excuse me, it's a little bit. It reminds me of Moneyball in a way, where Billy Beane brings in Jonah, who's playing basically Paul DiPodesta, but in the movie, if you've seen it, Brad Pitt brings in Jonah Hill, and
I've seen this one.
Oh, thank God! I was about to explain it to you.
I don't believe you.
Yes,
yeah, the last couple months, but I saw it.
Okay, did you hopefully all in one sitting if you could manage?
Yes, actually, yes.
And you're looking at all those scouts around the room, and again, it's I have that in my mind's eye where here's this thing that, and again, it's not necessarily on that wavelength because this one is even worse than that because of the experience. So I get it, but at the end of the day, do I credit him and her for putting themselves in this position. In a way, I do. I kind of admire it because, my God, man, you're going to go through. You had to know you're going to get a shitstorm coming your way, and and clearly you have.
I'm going to stop you there.
Yeah.
I think he's oblivious.
No, I don't. He's too smart to be oblivious.
No, you can be brilliant and be oblivious. At
That's
this
true.
Point, everything leads me to believe that he is completely oblivious.
James,
that he thought that this could be some sort of win.
No. No, and you know what? Hold on. I actually agree with that part. I do. I agree with that part that he thinks it's going to be a win. I think but I think he knows it's not going to be the popular decision. I think he knows that he's going to be drugged through it. I just don't think he cares. Again, like he's been given the if this was a movie, if he was a director, he's made movies that have been critically disasters, so he's already knows what that feels like. I think he feels the critics are going to hate this one, but it's going to be this legacy move for me, where at the end of the day the audience will appreciate it, just to keep the analogy going.
I think it's very possible
really
that like when Kelsey Grammer came and sat next to him courtside, it was because he saw down Periscope and had no idea that he was a critically acclaimed actor from Frasier and from Cheers. Like, I actually at this point believe. Look here again. I don't want to beat this one down again.
I know,
but I'm gonna say this. You had an opportunity for the messaging outside of the walls of Golden One Center to be very specific. That Monty McNair was running the show. That Joe Dumars is gone. That you let him hire Mike Brown and not the guy that you preferred in Mark Jackson. You had this moment where you had this opportunity to say, I took a step back, I let the basketball people make the basketball moves, and if it works out, then I can be like, everyone can cheer for me and say, look, hands off, and look what happened. Or if it doesn't work out, you can say, great, I got to fire another guy, and now we're going to start over again. But at least I did it your way, and I showed you that I tried it your way, and it didn't work, so I'm going to go back to my way. This undermines all of that. It does. It just
and guess what? But guess what, James? Last I checked, Monty McNair still has his job as a general manager.
Yeah.
If he was really that up in arms about it, he could walk away. I know he's under contract, but Vivek would be like, hey, if you're not cool with this, great, there's the door.
Well, and I also made the point, too, on the radio yesterday when I was on with Kenny, very specifically, like when you go into a season where you got what are called lame duck general managers, right? If that's what happens, well, it's not like those guys, if they do turn this thing around, well, what if they don't want to come back because you wouldn't give them a contract? And all of a sudden they can go get a better job that doesn't have 16 years of playoff drought and meddling ownership. They can go get a job because they just showed that they can build a team out in Sacramento, but now you don't have them under contract because you wanted to make them prove it or something. I'm not sure, but if you prove it in Sacramento, you might be able to get a much better job, which from my estimation, there are like 29 of them that are better. They're like straight up. 29 of them are better.
But to that point, the lame duck thing does not bother me, especially when you're in the draft. The lame duck doesn't bother me. He's still got I think Monty McNair knows he still has to earn his contract. Now, I think he may think he already has. Don't get me wrong. I think he probably looks at what he's done as, but I still feel like he's on the clock. And again, I think the way the gig is positioned, when the end of the year happens, James, it's not like, okay, now we start negotiations. No, the end of the year is to get through the draft and into free agency. And once you put that to bed, then you worry about your general manager. Typically, that's how these things work.
Sean, you had enough time to negotiate a contract for a new assistant general manager for the Stockton Kings.
But it hasn't been announced yet.
She put it on her Twitter bio. That's an announcement.
She did.
You had enough time to do it.
Have you seen a press release from the Sacramento Kings? And this is the guy who broke the story. So
I haven't.
Have you seen a? Yeah, I know.
But I'll tell you this: I really do hope that someone is telling her that from here on out, you can't talk about other players on other teams, because that is a violation that will get your franchise fined and lose draft picks. Can someone give her like the Magic Johnson treatment, like walk over the handbook?
Yeah. Well, that's up for them. That's up for them to teach her. But I will say this, like the whole lame duck thing doesn't bother me. And again, to me, it's a drop in the bucket. If you're picking up an option, if there's one that exists, or guaranteeing him another year, whatever it's going to take, it's not like Monty McNair is among the highest paid general managers in the league. In fact, he's more towards the bottom. So it's not like, what are they really talking about? I don't feel Monty McNair is going into the draft and free agency and having to do his job and thinking to myself, man, I'm going to screw this team. You know what? Like, or I'm going to do anything that's not going to position them to do the right thing. Like, that's absurd. And again, lame duck GM is not the same as lame duck coach. A coach has to have players believe in this system and the coach. If you're a lame duck, you're screwed. Like, if you're a lame duck coach, you're screwed. When you're a lame duck GM, no one cares. No one cares. The organization is saying, do the right thing, earn your keep. I mean, I can't. There's a lot of things to fault the Kings. That one I can't fault them, especially considering that I feel like that takes care of itself in August or September. They're not worried about it in May.
We'll see. We'll see how it goes.
And you know what? Monty McNair shouldn't worry about it in May either, because he's got a draft to worry about. He's paid to do a draft.
Well, I don't think he's worrying about it, but that's why you got your people. Oh,
yeah,
Brenden,
and to be honest,
Mike, what do you got for us, Brenden?
I think there could be an interesting aspect with the draft, though. Like, what if and I think we talked about this on 1320 yesterday a little bit, James, but like, say that Monty McNair thinks that Shaedon Sharpe is that guy, that he's going to be a future all-star, but the first 2 years of his career, he's probably not going to contribute all that much. So you're betting that at the end of this one season that people see the future with him, and it's like, okay, it was a good pick because he's going to end up working. But it's not like the production that you're getting right now. Yeah, so like, does he feel comfortable enough to take the upside swing? And maybe that's not the way that this franchise would go no matter what, the more patient route. But I think not feeling like that's an option could be an issue.
I get you. Yeah.
And this is Sacramento. It's not necessarily entirely Monty McNair's call.
No.
So, and it never has been. Like, he can make the call, he can be the guy, but it's a think tank. And it's, again, not unusual to Sacramento, but it's a think tank. And it is what it is, man. These decisions are made. Your general manager, what did I say, James? Do you remember what I equated general managers to for most organizations in the NBA, especially in the NBA, but even in baseball at this juncture, even in football, you are middle management. It's middle management retail. You have somebody who operates and is your mouthpiece, and we get all that, but you have other people that make decisions within the organization also. And a lot of times the room wins out. So they can say all the time, yeah, I've got ultimate authority. You do. You've got authority to go out and make moves and to bring, but you still at the end of the day have to have them approved. You know, you have to have consensus. You have to have, it's like a head coach. The head coach is the one making the shots, but your players are the one actually doing the job. So you're positioning yourself to be effective and be this. I mean, everybody knows this. It's professional sports. It's not just one guy who's sitting there going, aha, and just pulling the trigger without sending it up through, hey, I'm going to do this. Are we good? We got the butt. You have to make sure all these things are checked. Yes, at the end of the day, though, it does fall on Monty McNair, and that is true. So
interesting. This has been a fun day because we haven't got sidetracked. We've just like elongated the conversations on each of these things, and I think they're good conversations. And that brings us to our next topic, which is the Kings are looking at like 4 or 5 players that are going to be around that number 4 spot. They're going to bring in a lot of people. The NBA draft combine is going on right now. We're seeing, Shaedon Sharpe came in at like 6'4" and 1/4 without shoes on, with like a 6'11" and a half wingspan. So a little shorter than you thought, but close to 6'6" with shoes. But the wingspan is crazy, almost 7 foot. But there's a group of players here that have like weird sort of ties or different things. Like, I think we've transferred our focus of the coaching search, and especially delving deep into these young coaches that don't have like a huge track record, but have like little bits of information that crumbs that you can start to follow. But some of these players have crumbs as well, and I think it's really cool to start like breaking down some of these things. I did look up Paolo Banchero's mom, Rhonda Banchero Smith Banchero, played for the Monarchs in 2000. She was I think she was 14 overall, but the 3rd round draft pick by, I think it was Jerry Reynolds. She didn't last she lasted a year, but only played like 9 games, played sparingly. So there's a tie there. There's a bunch of ties, right, Brenden?
There is. I think that, Banchero is a Seattle guy as well. Jaden Ivey is the one that has a lot of interesting previous sports connections, with his mom being the women's head coach at Notre Dame. She played in the WNBA. His dad was on the 49ers as a wide receiver. Don't know exactly how much playing time he got, but on the 49ers as a wide receiver is still an accomplishment, and you can see where he sort of gets the athleticism from. And who knows if Banchero has any sort of connections with like Doug Christie. I know all the Northwest guys are all fairly close. It's going to be an interesting situation for the Kings here at 4.
Yeah, I think that there's good stories too, right? Right. I mean, you skipped over the Jabari Smith Jr. I mean, Jabari was here. Sean, did you cover Jabari?
I did. Jabari was great, man. He was great human being to be around. He was fun. I haven't seen him since I covered him that I know of, and so I am looking forward to crossing paths again with him one day to see if he actually remembers me. That would be fun. But yeah, Jabari was great.
A fun dude, right?
Mm-hmm. Very fun. Vlade loved him. Vlade leaned on him a lot. Vlade loved him.
How, explain that?
So, you get the practice players, especially a guy like Jabari who didn't get into games very often. And I just remember always Vlade, my main man Jabari. Because, he'd kill him in practice, right? But Vlade was the guy, the glue, try to bring in everybody together. Chris loved Jabari too. Webb loved Jabari. So there was, you had a affinity for players like that who try to make you better. And, Vlade, let's be honest, Jabari Smith trying to stop even an older Vlade Divac. He had every tool in the tool shed, so he can make a guy look silly at times. So, but Jabari definitely helped make those guys better. He was, I think he realized it, and he was definitely not the type of skill set that was long for the NBA, but he was very, very well liked among the teammates for sure.
Yeah, it seems interesting that, again, we're going to get deeper and deeper into these players as we get closer to the draft. And, each of them are going to tell a story. And we kind of did what we would do first day, on Tuesday, late Tuesday night, early Wednesday morning, right? When we had the live pod, where we talked about what you would do with a pick. But I think we should probably get into it a little bit more with the business of basketball. There we go. We've got the 3 options, right? You can trade up, you can trade out, you can trade down, and I guess the 4th pick is you can make the selection at 4. I don't know. Where do you think the Kings are leaning? And I guess we start here. Brenden, do you think there's any way they move up?
I think it's possible. I don't know that I'd say it's likely, but I think that if the idea is that the timeline is making something happen right now, and they really believe in one of these top prospects as being a premier fit alongside Fox and Sabonis, that maybe you do include next year's pick and do something like you saw Dallas do to move up for Luka Doncic, when they absolutely just buy a prospect. And if you think that he's going to be, when are you going to be in another scenario where you're this close to, if you believe that one of those prospects is franchise altering, when's the next time the Kings are going to be in this sort of position? So I think it depends on how they value those guys, but I totally think it's in the cards.
Interesting. Sean, what do you think on that?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't bet on it. I just think it's unlikely. I think, I think it's so early on still. We haven't heard a lot of chatter yet, but I just think that the team probably knows how 1 through 4 is going to shake out. And if there's any variation to that and you want to draft the pick, then I think you're going to be comfortable with most 1 through 4. That said, like, I don't know where they're pegging 1 through 4. I don't know what their order's looking like and what they think yet. So, but I feel like you have to do your due diligence both ways. You're in the combine. You're gonna act as if you're going forward and drafting number 4, no matter what shakes out, and you're gonna put your list together. But at the same time, you're gonna explore all options. So you're not gonna leave any stone unturned. You're gonna know what the value of your pick is for your organization and what your assets are and what you can get, and then see if anything changes from week to week, or even in the days leading up to the draft. So when they go into the draft, they're going to know the value of that pick, and they're going to know who they're comfortable in picking. So moving up is the one that I think is probably the most unlikely. I think moving down, moving out, and then drafting the pick, if you had to rank it, I'm not sure where that ranks yet, but I think all those 3 scenarios would be more likely.
It's interesting because I hadn't really considered it, but then if you do look at the way that whole scenario turned out, what did Dallas end up giving up? The number 10 pick?
I believe it ended up being Cam Reddish and Trae Young.
Okay, yeah, and Cam Reddish is the 10th pick. I'm almost positive. So I think the Kings would be thinking, like, if you did something like that, because I wouldn't have considered it, like, giving up. But if you say, like, we'll give you a top 10 protected pick next year in the 2023 draft, and if not, a top 8 protected in 2024, I think that's interesting because your hope is that you do make the playoffs, right? And so it wouldn't be a lottery pick. It would be like a 14, 15, 16 pick. And if you're getting the right player, if you do believe that there's a star there that you're going to get that's a perfect fit, I think you probably do have to look at it and at least consider and kick the tires on it, because if you're talking about, a middle of the first round pick giving up for it, like, in theory, then it probably would make sense as long as you're protected in some way, like again, a top 10, top 12, whatever it would be. So that's interesting.
It is, by the way, with all those playoff hopes, it's just hard to imagine the team taking a dramatic step without moving, without moving a draft pick, right? Like, it's really hard to see them do anything of substance and adding a player. I mean, I give them credit for what they did with Sabonis, because now, granted, you moved Halliburton to do that, so I guess you could kind of call him, but not really. I mean,
not really.
Yeah, not really. He's already 2 years in the league at that point. But I just really don't feel like you can add somebody like that the type of player you'd like to add without moving a pick. It doesn't have to be this pick. It doesn't have to be number 4. I think number 4 just, as you mentioned, James, gets you into some rooms that you probably weren't able to get into before. You're in conversations that maybe you weren't able to navigate once before because you didn't have such a high draft pick. But at the same time, like, I feel like it's really difficult to add a player of the type of ilk that they'd like to without moving one of these draft picks.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really interesting discussion. Like, there are certain players that I would, like, a baseline, like, and I'm not even sure if you have the number 4 pick, would you trade the number 4 pick for John Collins and cap filler?
It's tough. I'd at very least want 16 back also, but
yeah, you'd have, like Brenden said, you'd have to get pretty creative. But if we're talking straight up, I don't know, probably not.
Okay, what if I gave you another one? What if I said the number 4 pick, Harrison Barnes, and cap filler for John Collins, number 16, and Kevin Huerter?
I struggle when you're losing Barnes.
if you can get it done without Barnes and move Holmes to a third team, because I know Holmes is not the most intriguing candidate for Atlanta with their center situation, but like it's hard for me if you're making like a win now move and you're moving one of your actual starting caliber players when you don't have very many.
But you would be gaining 2 starting level players and the 16th pick in the draft where you could still draft a young player.
Yeah. You'd have to really consider it, I think.
Because I think Atlanta is one we're going to keep circling because, like, I keep hearing that Atlanta's intrigued with moving off of John Collins' contract. They're concerned about his contract pretty heavily, and they also would more than listen on Herter at this point.
Well, and Herter doesn't have. Yeah, Herter's a little bit more, but he's signed for pretty long term as well through 25-26 as well. So
yeah, talking 4-year deal. And
yeah,
I mean,
so,
it's reasonable, right? It's like 13, 14, 15.
Yeah, it caps out at 17 at the final year. So whereas John Collins is into the 20s and mid 20s, you're eclipsing
23, 25, 26, 27.
I do wonder though. That's a lot of salary to bring back, and at what point does that hurt you with Sabonis? At what point does that hurt? I mean, you already have a pretty max player with Fox. I know. Someone like Sabonis has to. I mean, when he tests free agency, it's going to be unrestricted.
Yeah,
right, James. So
yeah. Well, Sabonis is
going.
Yeah, Sabonis is going to be an interesting situation because he can take an extension next year, and I'll get into the whole numbers. I'll break all of them down here in the next couple of days, I guess.
But the likelihood of him doing that is like none, right? Like he's going to go unrestricted because he can make entirely more money.
Oh no, he can make way more money. But again, we're going to keep coming to the question: is he a max level player? Like what level, contract is he? And I do think he's going to make a lot of money. But I need to do all the math on what exactly he can get if he opts out next year versus the following year. And it's substantial. I mean, it's a tremendous amount of money. But again, just because you can make, $32 million a year doesn't mean you will make $32 million a year. And so you can think that Sabonis would make something like that. But at the same time, there has to be someone else who's willing to pay that. And you're always going to have Larry Bird rights to him. So you have the ability to pay him more than anyone else does.
Sure.
Yeah.
And I think that's where I get into it for me. It's like when you ask that trade, the Sabonis thing is in the back of my head. So if I'm bringing on 2 players like that in this trade scenario, I'm probably less apt to do it.
Yeah, but the cap is going to go up to
that's
it's going to go up to 120, and then by the time you're paying Sabonis, it's going to be like I think it's 132. So there's going to be a lot more money there. And so I think that that's a good thing. You're going to see the cap go up and Fox's contract goes up, but, it makes you take a more like conservative approach with a guy like DiVincenzo. And then you would still have Rashawn Holmes to go out and trade to go get another piece, if that made sense. So, you can flip him again and see if you can find someone who fits a role better, and then you'll still have your mid-level and all that stuff. So I think you can do it. You're just going to tie up some of your money long-term. But some of those contracts are reasonable. Like if John Collins is the 20 and 10 guy that he was 3 years ago, I mean, he's only 24 years old. If he's a 20 and 10 guy, then his contract is totally reasonable. It's just if he's a 16 and 8 guy, then maybe it's not. So can he be your legitimate number 2 scorer with Sabonis being your third scorer, but your hub, and Fox being your number 1? So I don't know. It's intriguing, right?
It very much is. And I love Collins. I think Collins would be a great king.
Yeah, I think so too.
I think an interesting scenario for me would be that they actually make the pick at 4. Say it's Jaden Ivey or Shaedon Sharpe, a guy that's going to take a little bit more time. But then you go out and move Holmes in the next year's first-round pick, top 6 protected or so, for a guy that can contribute right now and allows you to just be a little bit more patient with whatever draft pick you bring in, because they're not going to have immediate contribution. And I think that needs to be accepted. Like some guys will, but I think it's easier if you go into it assuming that you're probably not going to get somebody that's altering the direction of the franchise or the season just going into next year. But then you go get somebody that can be a little bit more short term and be more patient with the draft pick that they bring in.
I've got some weird stats that someone gave me. The number 4 pick has a starter quality player 40% of the time, compared to 25 to 30% for the 7 through 9. So if you look at the 7 through 9 as like where the Kings probably should have been, 7, 8, 9 is kind of the odds were much higher. The 4th pick has generated about 1 to 2 more wins per season as compared to picks 7 through 9. While picking a star level player is unlikely, it happens about 20% of the time at number 4, compared to 10 to 15% in 7 through 9. And, recent examples of the number 4 pick, Scotty Barnes, Patrick Williams, Andre Hunter, and Jaren Jackson Jr. Anything intriguing there? Yeah?
I would take every single one of those players.
Yeah, most of them are pretty good right there.
Yeah, and I think Hunter, they really like Hunter in Atlanta, and that's probably why they're moving to move off Collins. And of course, they have massive salary cap situation that's brewing, and so, like, I'm more likely to trade Harrison Barnes now than at any other time, because Harrison Barnes is under contract for $18.6 million, and then he's a free agent, an unrestricted free agent at the end of the season. And I think, like, as of right now, you're going to have a tough time retaining Harrison Barnes. So if I'm the Kings, I definitely would consider him as not an expiring contract, but as a piece that can go get me something else, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely does. Didn't consider him expiring.
Yeah,
Makes sense.
So, and I mean, there's value in that. So if you were making a deal with Atlanta, sure, you would like to, even if you give up Holmes in that deal, Holmes and Barnes for Herter and Collins, and swapping picks or giving up a future pick. So that makes a lot of sense, because then you're dumping a $10 million long-term contract, 11, 12, and you're taking back Herter's contract, and so you're taking on some money, but not nearly as much as you were before. And so you would be taking on a lot for Collins after year 1, but, you also have $70 million in cap space next season, where, you eat up that space now. So I think these are all interesting ways that we can do it. So again, like, I'll just go around. Brenden, trade up, trade down, trade out, make the pick.
Probably trade out for me.
So we're forecasting what the team will do or what we would do.
We see, that's good. Why don't you give me both?
Why don't you pound sand? No,
let me give both of mine real quick then. My forecasting is trade out. I probably would keep the pick.
If you had the GM job for more than a year.
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly.
Then these are the questions that. Okay. So if you're keeping the pick, then is that based on who you think is available there?
Yeah, I mean, I have 4 different guys that
and you're comfortable with all 4, so that means you would just take it, right?
I'd very much prefer one of the top 3, but if Jaden Ivey's there, I believe in Jaden Ivey.
Yeah. I think the team is likely to trade. I don't know if it's this pick or if it's future. I think they're likely to trade. So I guess I will go that way. If it's me, I'm likely to trade as well, but I need to know what the market is, so I need to know what I'm getting.
Are you trading down, or are you trading? Do you think the Kings will trade down, or do you think they'll trade out?
Oh, that's that. I mean, this is silly at this point. Like, I don't know. I honestly have no idea. To answer your silly question, James, I'll say they're trading out.
Okay.
I think they'll trade out. So whatever. I don't know that. That's speculative. But and then if it's what I would do, I would probably look to move it, because I feel like moving it. Again, I told you there's only one guy that I feel I would maybe 2 that I would be over the moon about, and everyone else I just kind of have some questions and don't really love. So I'm going to be looking very, very hard to try to move the pick if it were me. I don't know what I'm getting with that pick yet. So if I don't like any of the things that I'm getting, then yeah, I feel very comfortable in making the selection.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll just end it there.
Okay. What do you?
Hold on.
How dare you?
Answer your silly question, James.
Yeah, played hopscotch over this.
think the Kings will trade down and then possibly trade out once they trade down, but trade down and then trade out, if that's a possibility.
James chose chaos.
James chose all of the above.
Yeah. I chose chaos, and how I mean that is
because it's the Kings.
No, I think if you're sitting at 4 and the Pistons fall in love, let's just say Paolo Banchero falls to number 4, and the Pistons are like, look, we'll give you Sadiq Bey and something future, and we'll go from 5 to 4. Then I take it. And then if I'm at 5, then I'm looking at, like, maybe I work something out with a Collins deal. And I feel more comfortable because now I don't just have, now I've already got my replacement in place for Harrison Barnes if I do trade him, and I'm getting a shooter and I'm getting a guy like Collins. So I would try to manipulate. I think you could move down a couple of times in this draft and pick up assets like rotational players. I think if you went just for, again, the chaos theory, if I'm at 4 and we have this situation where a good player falls but you're not really interested in him, and you can you can take in a player like Sadiq Bey. Now if I'm at number 5, would I trade number 5 for number 10 and Kyle Kuzma? And hey, in that deal, give up Rashawn Holmes. Okay. So now I've still got a top 10 pick, but I've picked up Sadiq Bey and I've picked up Kyle Kuzma, and I've balanced my roster. Now I feel like I can take all kinds of players at number 10 that can fit a need or fit whatever, or I can trade out there and not worry about taking back a pick from Atlanta and try to make it swing a big deal. So again, I think that there's a lot of ways the Kings can improve themselves greatly. Maybe they tie up some cap space, but at the same time, I think that they can improve themselves greatly with a series of moves.
Your theory crafting is phenomenal.
I also realize that we've done this too long now, because not just today, but this past almost, not even a year of doing the Kings beat. James loves him some Sadiq Bey.
Drop 60. Come on.
Comes back to Sadiq Bey a lot. Jeremy Grant, we hear him a lot. James,
those are available players.
And
I've never loved Jeremy
James.
Grant.
Everyone's available.
We're all available. Let's see. November, December, January, February, March, April,
Yeah, man.
May.
I'll take a shot every time I hear Sadiq Bey.
7 months of the Kings beat.
Yeah.
7 months of the Kings beat.
When's our anniversary? What do we do?
I don't the anniversary is late October. It's
how about that?
Yeah, it's like the last couple of days of October is when we kicked off the Kings beat. There's all kinds of options here, and again, I think Sadiq Bey, just because he checks all the boxes. He's young, he hits threes, he plays defense, he's a role player, all those boxes. So, just saying, I don't think he's gonna be a star.
I do that to tease, not to criticize. I'd be more than happy with Sadiq Bey on the Kings.
That's right. All right, do we have any final thoughts? Brenden, you got anything? There's something about Mary.
I'll finish the second half today.
No, you know what you're going to do? What else do you have to do today, Brenden? You know what you need to do?
Two other podcast recordings.
You need to start the movie over and just watch it. That's doing it true justice. The Farrelly brothers will thank you.
That's right.
Sure.
The guys in the tree playing the guitar will thank you.
What's next?
What are these songs? Yeah.
What is next after something about Mary Swingers? You hadn't seen Swingers.
Tell me.
I say you have to watch Swingers.
Yeah.
Make sure it's the John Favreau Vince. Yeah, that's exactly right. Make sure it's the John Favreau Vince Vaughn Swingers, or else you're watching something completely different, pal.
Oh yeah. And I just realized that his buddy that is, what is he? Is he a dentist in the end? But his buddy, who's his high school buddy, and then his buddy later, that says he ran into Mary at. That's how it's starts him off, right?
Oh, you're back to something about Mary. Yeah.
Yeah, that is actually
Chris Elliott, right?
Well, no, Chris Elliott is Woogie.
Oh, that's right.
No. The buddy, though, in the early years he has long hair. In the later years he's bald. He was in Sex and the City, and he just passed away.
Oh,
am I wrong?
I don't know. I can't picture that person. It's been a while since I've seen the movie.
What's that?
Been a while since I've seen it. Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe I'm off there, but yeah. Anyway, spectacular movie, and we'll keep feeding you more movie stuff. Now he can catch up with all of our movie lines. That's the thing.
No, I don't know. It's going to take a long time.
It is.
He likes to watch movies in 15-minute increments.
All right. That's going to do it for this edition of the King's Beat podcast. Again, we made the big announcement at the beginning of the show. Gary Gerald will be on the King's Beat Happy Hour on May 26th from 5:30 to 7:30. That should be an absolutely tremendous event. Of course, it is Off the Record with the King's Beat Virtual Happy Hour Part 6, The Voice. So moving from left to right on your dial, The Voice. And we'll talk about lead changes and, stop some pops.
He's got the bucket.
He's got the bucket.
G-Man needed to be like a spokesman for KFC.
Oh, there you go. Rayleigh's, that's what he was, like the produce man for Rayleigh's. I grew up watching him as a produce man. Sweet. Okay, so yeah, again, make sure you're jumping on board with the King's Beat. Premium subscribers are the only ones who get the link to the happy hour, which are a lot of fun. We get a little drunk. Well, not drunk, but like some of us, I don't know. I actually have a King's Beat happy hour t-shirt coming out soon. So that will be fun as well. And make sure if you're still watching on YouTube, give us a thumbs up, give us a subscribe, and, we'll be back next week. So for Fox 40's Sean Cunningham and Brenden Nunes from the King's Pulse podcast and, of course, the King's Herald, I am James Ham, your Kings Insider for ESPN 1320 and the King's Beat. We will see you next week.